the Freddy series is extremely near and dear to my heart. I've been in love with it since I played the first game, and it continues to be one of my special interests. So while I wait for Security Breach to get an update that will allow me to download it to my computer, I figured I'd talk about the series as a whole and give it a review. This retrospective will be divided into multiple parts. Part 1 will deal with the original games. Part 2 will deal with the Scott Cawthon games made after the series' original end, and Part 3 will deal with the newer games made by Steel Wool Studios. FNaF started when Scott Cawthon made a game called Chipper & Sons Lumber Company. A reviewer referred to the characters in that game as looking like creepy animatronics. Scott decided that he could make animatronics that looked creepier than that, and so the series was born. Actually, should I talk about Scott's previous games? There is no pause button, and Sin and Survive are both good ways to spend time while waiting at the doctor's office. Chipper & Sons is pretty fun, but it gets pretty tedious. You have to walk back and forth across this ever-lengthening world trying to get resources, which isn't bad at first, but the resources you get are random and you have a very limited inventory. So what ends up happening is you activate a specific event over and over, hoping for a rare resource, only to get some garbage you already have 99 of. Repeat ad nauseum. I'm still not over those goddamn jellyfish. So whether for the fact that cutscenes were so consistently funny, I've given up a while ago. But seriously, these cutscenes are something else. The Desolate Hope is my freaking jam. Like, okay, so the gameplay is weird and different from the standard RPG, but it's fun! Once you get used to all the weirdness, this game is super engaging. It's just so fun to learn how to best use the game's mechanics properly and actually tear through bosses. A lot of RPGs have this issue where you mainly press attack and occasionally use magic or whatever special moves are called. It can get pretty mindless. This game is the opposite of that. It's mindful. Also, the story is great. Yeah, if you're gonna play another Scott Cawthon game, play this one. Maybe I'll do a full review of this game later, or a Let's Play. Anyways, Five Nights at Freddy's was a small indie horror game made on a budget of $0. I'm sure by now you all know the basic setup. You are a security guard working for the comically incompetent Fazbear Entertainment. The animatronic cartoon characters are a beloved source of childhood joy, but they
do get a bit quirky at night.
Your goal is simple: survive. Each of the 4 animatronics have their own AIs, which determine how they move. Jacob wanders aimlessly, sometimes moving towards you and sometimes moving away. Bonnie will wander a bit, but he can move quickly, skipping over areas. Once he's in the hall, he's not going to leave until he tries to get you. Foxy is an odd one. He stays in his little corner, but slowly gets more and more energetic till he finally leaves and rushes straight for your office. The only thing that stops him is the camera. Pro tip, if he's not in Pirate Cove, close your door immediately. Freddy Fazbear is slow and doesn't move much during the main nights, but once he gets going, he's extremely deadly, always beelining straight to your office. Thankfully, he gets slower when you look at him. Golden Freddy. If you fail to prevent a robot animal from entering your office, you will be jump-scared and killed. Yeah, I feel like now would be a good time to discuss the jump scares. I don't want to leave that elephant hanging in the room for too long. It's time to defend the jump scares. Jump scares are generally one of the main things that people talk about when it comes to this series. Here's the thing though, jump scares only happen when you fuck up somehow. They're the lose condition, the game over screen. This isn't a cheap source of horror, because the horror doesn't come from them. It comes from everything else. The atmosphere, the music, the feeling that something is creeping right behind you, the sound of laughter in the distance without the ability to ascertain its location, that sense of dread that comes from knowing you're going to die. But maybe you just sit perfectly still, you'll last long enough to survive. The jump scares just act as a tension dissolver once you do die. See, the great thing about FNaF is how it's so different from other horror games. A lot of horror games fall into the trap of being walking simulators, where you just walk from point A to point B, but a spooky thing happens in between. These games tend to use jump scares in a cheap way. You walk into an empty room and then a jack-in-the-box pops out like, fuck you! The jack-in-the-box doesn't mean anything. It doesn't add anything to the story or gameplay, or even his gameplay. It's just the creator's way of saying, this is a horror game, right? If we make the players jump, that means they're horrified, right? You take away the jump scares and you have nothing, they're just boring. These are not horror games. These are horror experiences at best. FNaF is just you, alone, stuck in a single place. It's chilling even before anything has killed you, and the strategy and resource management make this an actual game. Thus, it's a horror game, and it's great. If I have anything bad to say about the horror games, which I do, it's that a lot of them are way too loud and high-pitched. Listening to this shit is physically painful and gives me headaches. It's not scary, it's just annoying. Now, obviously every person has different tolerances when it comes to loud noises. For me, I can't even whistle because it hurts my ears. So just give an accessibility option to turn down the jump scare volume so I can appreciate the creepy ambient music without having to take a break every 2 or 3 deaths. This game also has a neat story, but I'm a video game maker and not a story writer, so there's more stuff for me to say about the gameplay side of things than the writing side of things. Also, the first game doesn't have much story to talk about. It's clear that Scott made this thinking that it could be the last game he ever made, so he didn't want the story to be anything deep. There's animatronics. They're haunted by ghosts of some kids who were murdered. Yeah, that's kinda it. Remember when some people thought this game was just a dream sequence by the murderer while on death row, and then the second game came out, and it was apparent that these games were to dream? The whole idea of these games being dreams was thrown out as ridiculous and unsatisfying. Yeah, I'm gonna have to talk about the story of these games. But we'll do that later. For now, it's time to talk about the sequel that everyone wanted. It's something borrowed, something new, they're both blue, it's FNaF 2. This game puts you in a brand new office, facing off against brand new animatronics, and this time, there's no doors. There's a big one right there, and there's 2 vents. But the point is you can't close them to prevent the animatronics from getting into the room. Instead, you have to let them get into the room and put on the Freddy Fazbear mask so they'll think you're an animatronic like them, and then they'll leave you alone. Except for Foxy, who is not only somehow able to see through the mask for some reason, but gets more pissed the more often you put it on. Maybe he can't see through the mask. Maybe he really just hates Freddy for being the star of the show. Well, he's the assigned villain that everyone hates. Shine some bright lights in his eyes and it'll just go away, though. According to Phone Guy, that also works for other animatronics, but as far as I'm aware, that's not really a thing in the gameplay. You can also use the cameras to look around at the animatronics, but this is pretty useless. Instead, the camera is used to wind up a music box. Don't wind it up, you get killed by Slender Mine. People accuse this game, and basically this whole series, of being a cash cow, where each game is just a complete copy of the previous, and no. Each game has you doing something very different from each other. Sure, they're similar to each other, but they're games in the same franchise. Most franchises have games that are similar to each other. And seriously, go check out FNaF fan games. A lot of them are way more similar to the first game in mechanics. Not necessarily saying they're bad, but if you're looking for copies of FNaF 1, there you go. That said, I do think these games have an issue with repetitiveness between nights. And Night 7 has you doing the exact same thing as Night 1 or 2, just harder. Generally, the difficulty curves in a nice way and new elements are added or made more important. It makes the game feel like a fun experience throughout, and usually not like a mindless repetitive slog until like the 25th attempt at all 20 mode, which is just an optional challenge. Where the repetitiveness can hurt though is in the scares. Unfortunately, these games do become less scary as you play them. First time you see something, it's weird and scary, but the third time it's just, yeah. You'd think that having 10 separate animatronics in this game would help alleviate the repetition, but instead it just accentuates it. When it comes down to it, all the animatronics are basically the same, falling into simple categories. The vent animatronics used to get into the office isn't even a meaningful distinction because they can only be warded off from a single avenue, which is using the mask in the office. Like the first game, the animatronics are all static images, which further hurts the horror department, and I think more so than the first game. Mangle is super scary in concept, but the fact that you never see this thing crawling or writhing around makes it feel kind of eh. Or, I don't know, imagine if you flashed the light down the hall and saw Toy Chica about to enter a door, and then she turns around and looks you dead in the eyes and starts going down the hallway instead. I don't know. It's hard not to see all the little missed opportunities for this game in terms of evolving the formula. It wasn't really until the later games that I got to see big, fun, scary changes in the gameplay. Oh, what a perfect segue to talk about FNaF 3, except we still have to talk about the story and lore of FNaF 2. So unlike the first game, which only gave the basic bare endoskeleton of a plot, this game gives a lot of details and cool bits. Fredbear's family diner? Whoa, what's that? A yellow suit? In the back? Could it be? 1987? Whoa. 2 comes before 1? Wow. Along with these overt references, there's also a small chance to get a lore minigame after dying. These Atari-style lore minigames have basically become synonymous with the franchise, and now all the fan games use them in their games because of how cool they are. The Atari sprites leave a lot to the imagination, which is the perfect way to give little bits of lore while still leaving stuff to mystery and forcing people to work at least a little to figure it out. Thankfully, it's not too hard in this game, unlike in future games, which would sometimes lord over how mysterious and vague they are. Oh yeah, save them! Save them. 5 kids were killed in the building you're in right now, possibly by this mysterious purple guy. Can I just say what a good idea it was to make this dude solid purple? If you made him a normal-looking guy, he wouldn't be so immediately recognizable. It's a good way to make it obvious he's the same character across different appearances while still having the Atari aesthetic. Take cake to the children. Yeah, purple guy just killed a kid outside of someplace, and then they became the puppet. Give gifts, give life. Puppet tries to do a good thing and takes 5 kids who died and gives them life as the animatronic. Foxy, go, go, go! Purple guy killed 5 more kids, but this time in a different building? This creates a very reasonable and easy to follow series of events from which we can make a basic timeline of the series. There's still some unanswered questions, such as why exactly is the puppet so special? Like, this kid possessed the puppet on their own, but these 5 needed help to possess their animatronics. Also, the puppet is the only one whose AI can't be messed with, because
the others are like animals. But I am very aware.
Why? Like, the puppet having greater awareness kinda makes sense because phone guys seem to indicate that the puppet animatronic has more powerful AI than the others. But why is the puppet's possession in pretty much every other possession almost immediate? But these 5 and maybe these 5 needed the assistance of the puppet. Beyond that, there were a lot of hints towards this and that, like, hey, this place is a huge mess with dirt and permanent wet floors, which doesn't make sense for a new and improved restaurant, and there's this big banner saying happy birthday, but it doesn't make sense for there to be a birthday every day, with the same banner every time. But it makes a lot of sense if you assume that the place is already closed down and you're guarding the place until the plastics are scrapped, and the last event scheduled before the place shut down was a birthday party, which explains the banner, which means the guard we play as, Jeremy Fitzgerald, isn't the second guard at all. He's a later guard listening to the pre-recorded message. That's why the message says summer job, but Jeremy worked in the fall. But why would Jeremy be listening to old tapes? Unless he's phone guy listening back on his messages he left while these kids were killed because he feels somewhat responsible. But Fritz is definitely the third guard, which means that Jeremy must be the 4th. Wait. 7 comes before 1? Wow. Fritz and Jeremy both see shadow bonding, which combines with the theory that shadow bonding was born from the agony of the bite of 87, which happened at the aforementioned birthday party in... Wait, agony? What the hell even is agony? Infecting them is a greater power than any other remnant agony's positive counterpart is introduced. What the fuck is FNaF lore? FNaF 3 is the 3rd game in the franchise that brings some changes. Most notably, while previous games had an ever-growing number of robot threats, this one only has 1. Meet Springtrap, who, as we learn in the ending, is actually Purple Man after he died in his favorite fursuit. This gives us an interesting promise. Instead of a bunch of robots going down a mostly predetermined path towards you, you're playing a game of cat and mouse with a sociopathic murderer as you try to fend him off for as long as possible. And for the most part, the game actually delivers. Springtrap is quiet and methodical. He doesn't make any loud clunking noises, just occasional groans of pain because his life is a fucking misery. Every room he goes into, he either hides from the cameras so he can more easily sneak up on you, or he stares at the cameras dead in the eyes. He knows you see him, and he wants you to know that he's onto you, so don't get so cocky. His ratty and disheveled appearance combined with that fucking grin. Ooh, this is good horror. So people complain about Springy's jump scares, saying they aren't as scary as the one from the first 2 games. To which I say, that's the point. The jump scares in the first 2 games were done by children who think the scariest thing is just popping up and saying, boom! Springtrap doesn't give a shit. He's in the room. He's going to kill you. Because he's a serial murderer. That's the real scary shit. Seriously, it's not a startling fear, it's the creeping dread that comes from looking this thing in the eyes and knowing it's killed numerous kids, and you're just a witness who he's eliminating to cover his tracks. Nothing personal, but he will enjoy it a bit if that's any consolation. Granted, some of that appreciation only comes after the reveal, but that's what repeat playthroughs are for. Or Nightmare Night. Anyway, Springtrap shuffles around the place, you have to constantly keep check on him. This is great! Finally a FNaF game where the camera is actually used to look at the animatronics and follow them. Literally every camera position is important, because with the vents, this fucker could be right next to you in a heartbeat if you're not careful about sealing vents or using an audio lure. Yeah, this game has audio lures. They're probably the part I like the least about this game. And basically you play the sound of Balloon Boy saying, hello, and Springtrap's animatronic programming forces him to go into the room you use the audio in. It's kind of interesting and fits the lore, but it spoils the image of a cold-blooded killer who you have to outwit and play cat and mouse with. It starts to feel more like a dog who you call into the room whenever he leaves, and he dutifully returns. On later nights they make it so there's a chance to ignore you instead, which really only makes the audio lures feel inconsistent and annoying, because to a certain extent you're forced to rely on good RNG rather than on outwitting your opponent. I'm not sure what the best way to fix the audio lures would be though. Maybe make it so that when you do it, it influences Springy's next movement check, so he doesn't move immediately, but when he next moves, he's more likely to move to the location you so graciously suggested. This creates a sense of dread in between the time of using the lure and waiting to see if it worked or not. And if you play the audio multiple times, it'll influence his movement check even more so. Now there's a risk and reward factor to clicking the button multiple times to increase the chance, while also making it more likely for the button to break. Right, I haven't talked about the system malfunctions. If you use any of these systems too much, they'll break, and you'll be forced to perform a system restart to get them working again. And not too much more to say about that. And also there are phantom animatronics who will screw with the various systems, and also your head. Presumably these are the ghosts of the kids who died, but after Purple Man destroyed their robot bodies, they don't have a physical form to possess, so they're just ghosty little phantoms instead. Not entirely sure why they're working for this fucker. They have the same eyes though, so maybe that means something. Yeah, I guess we're talking about the story of this game. So, we get a series of minigames after each night showcasing the OG animatronics, sometime after FNaF 1 probably. Each of the animatronics are lured over to the special back room that no one knows about by Shadow Freddy, who the fuck is Shadow Freddy? Okay, like clearly Shadow Bonnie or Rickrophysphysazix was created from Agony, presumably of the Bite of 87. Which leads me to believe that Shadow Freddy was also created from Agony, but Agony from what exactly? The agony of the child murders? Because then why would it look like Freddy or Fredbear or whomever? Shouldn't it look like Spring Bonnie or maybe just William? Is Shadow Freddy the agony born from the Springlock failures? But then why is he helping William destroy robots? Or is Shadow Freddy born from the agony of the deaths of William's son? Which could explain why he's helping him? Maybe? Or the agony of Cassidy. Wait, who's Cassidy? Wait, which one is the one who shouldn't have been killed? Okay, see, this is my problem with FNaF lore. The whole thing is one big riddle. We ask Scott for answers, and he just gives us more riddles. Specifically, he makes completely new games, with completely new stories, with the intent of answering the questions left by the previous games, but only in the form of more cryptic riddles. The new game ends up introducing a bunch of new questions and new riddles, and the whole thing becomes a giant clusterfuck. And seriously, who the fuck is Shadow Freddy? Anyway, so we don't know who Shadow Freddy is or why they're assisting William, but the main point is that William Afton is destroying these animatronics because... I mean, looking at it now, he's clearly doing it to harvest their sweet, sweet remnant. But back then, remnant wasn't really a thing in the lore. I guess maybe back then he was just trying to experiment with them and see what would happen before Scott added Remnant into the story. And blah blah blah, y'all know what happens next. He destroys them all, the ghosts come back and bully him into putting on a fursuit. He dies, and hey, isn't it cool how the trailer showcases she without telling us what was happening? And then the ghosts disappear and... bad ending! Yeah, we all know this now, but this came as a great shock to everyone the first time they played the game. How is this the bad ending, we ask? The bad guy died. The spirits are put to rest. Well, that's the thing. The spirits weren't put to rest. They're still here, haunting the place. Calling this the bad ending is actually brilliant, because it immediately lets people know that there's more to this game. A good ending, if you will, which prompts people to try to find it. And find it they did. And again, I think at this point, most people already know how to find it. You perform a series of increasingly cryptic actions in order to access these minigames, and then perform a series of even more cryptic actions within the minigame, which all leads up to the happiest day. One of the kids who haunts Golden Freddy with the assistance of every other animatronic in the game, except Toy Freddy, because he's an asshole, is finally given the birthday party he deserves. And with that, 5 of the kids can finally be put to rest. This is a really beautiful ending. Like, I really can't describe how this makes me feel. I'm somewhat torn on how I feel about this game being followed up by FNaF 4, whose ending is considerably darker and sadder, especially compared to the bittersweet happiness and sadness that comes from FNaF 3. It's kind of weird ending the series on a sad note instead of a happy-ish one. Then again, the FNaF 4 ending would be even sadder without the knowledge of Happiest Day, so... Now we have FNaF World and Pizzeria Simulator, so it's a bit of a moot point. But at the time it seemed like a very odd decision. So yeah, let's talk about FNaF 4. This time, the animatronics have followed you home and are invading your dreams. Now you have to listen for the animatronics move around and breathe in order to fend them off. So if you're hard of hearing, then you can just go fuck yourself. Yeah, FNaF 4 is not my favorite game in the series because of how inaccessible the gameplay is. Granted, I'm sure that the other games are inaccessible to blind people, but I don't have sight problems, and this is my review on how I feel about this series. And how I feel is that I physically can't hear the sound of these footsteps, and I can't turn up the volume because the jump scares are louder than ever. And please, God, give these games multiple sound options that are just a visual cue to go along with the sounds. Something like Minecraft subtitles or something. And don't point out that this game has a warning indicator, because that has the opposite problem. It tells you that there's something in the door before the audio cue plays, which makes the game easy and brainless and takes out the horror. And it sucks, because this game is pretty fun. It has such good atmosphere and horror, but I physically can't hear the thing I need to hear to play the game, so... And then Night 5 comes in with Nightmare Fredbear, and suddenly the game is playable. Fredbear makes a different footsteps sound, and I can actually hear that one. I don't know if it's because the sound is louder, or if it's something to do with pitch. But yeah, I can actually play Night 5. And since there's only one animatronic to deal with, Night 5 is ironically the easiest night in the game. I like how scary and weird Night 5 is the first time you play it, but the fact that it's the easiest night kind of throws me off. I'm not even sure if it's supposed to be this easy, or if the other nights are this easy too. You know, you don't even need a mod that makes the jump scares quieter, just one that replaces the other animatronic footstep noises with Fredbear. This game would probably jump up to one of my favorites in the series. Whatever, there's not much else to talk about gameplay. Oh shit! Fun with Plush Trap. Yeah. This is a minigame that exists, I guess. If you complete it, you get a bonus, but it's a one-time bonus, and if you die, it no longer counts, so... Okay. Yeah, onto the story. So there's this kid named Evan? Wait, how do you pronounce this? I should actually look that up. So there's this kid named Evan, and his bigger brother is a bit of a bully. If you replace bully with perpetrator of manslaughter. That's not until later. We see this kid's life in the days leading up to the birthday party, which I'm sure will go smashingly. The minigames are great, just filled with lore. Like this big thing that says 1983, the year that this takes place in. That's not a controversial statement at all. And also these 5 kids who are presumably the kids who were killed and put in the toy animatronics. Or the Fredbear plush who... Wait, what is his deal? So in some occasion we see a Fredbear plush with a walkie-talkie, which implies that William used the plush to talk to his son through the remote. Maybe? Why is he saying these things to his child? Why doesn't Michael react at all to his father's voice coming out of this stuffed animal? Or is the plush possessed by the marionette or something? Is it speaking directly inside of Evan's mind? And blah blah blah, kid gets his head bit off and dies. But who the fuck is this voice? Is it supposed to be Fredbear plush? Because the font color is different. Is this William's regular talking voice and it's a slightly different color to indicate that it sounds different without the walkie-talkie distorting it? Why is the color the same as this other character? Is she the one talking? Is this Elizabeth? The most important question. What in the ever-loving fuck is in that fucking box? Oh, Jesus Christ. It's not proof of the dream theory or anything, which... yeah. Let's talk about that. Having everything be a dream is such a bad way to end the series. FNaF 3 gave us a beautiful ending, and the dream theory just is, nope. This is satisfying. Seeing William Afton suffer consequences for his actions is satisfying. Seeing the children getting to move on and go to heaven is satisfying. What if it's a dream, then none of it really matters? Why should I be happy that this kid's imaginary dream friends did a cool thing? Why should I be happy that this kid dreamed about his father's gruesome death? Don't get me wrong, you can have a story where it was all a dream and have it be satisfying. The Binding of Isaac is a perfect example of that, but that's because The Binding of Isaac was created from the start to be a dying dream, and the whole story revolves around that. The gameplay exists within a dream, the cutscenes exist either within the real world or on the border, and everything has significance, it all fits together. FNaF being a dream doesn't fit anything together. Why would this child's dream contain accurate minimum wage info from the future? Why would this child have a whole series of dreams that are completely realistic, but then these dreams all take place in a made-up world where dolls transform into monsters? Because here's the thing. The 4th game is a dream because it represents something. It represents Michael's trauma as he regrets what he did to his brother. Trauma that he is forced to face after Phone Guy mentions the bite of 87 and it brings back memories of a certain other bite. Trauma that he is forced to face after he sees what he has done. When he sees into Golden Freddy's eyes and sees his little brother. It's me, Michael. It's me. Before someone says Scott specifically said he didn't think people would accept the ending, no, he didn't. He said, would the community accept it that way? He didn't say, would the community accept the ending? Not even a vague, would the community accept it? But would they accept it that way? Which, context clues, people. In the blog post he talks about how no one has found the pieces and he's decided not to help them. Would the community accept it that way? If the pieces are never found? If we're forced to find them on our own and possibly come up empty? Would the community accept it that way? And then later games came out and it was clearly not a dream, but some people just refused to admit they're wrong and claim that Scott retconned their theory and they were totally right when they made the theory. And again, no. Scott stated there was only one retcon in the story, and that the one retcon mentioned was integrated pretty seamlessly and most people didn't notice. If it had caused problems or confusions, then I would have addressed it here. The dream theory is not some minor thing that only a few people notice, and you better fucking believe that it caused problems and confusion. Fuck, I got really heated there. Hopefully the next game I talk about isn't too controversial. I actually really like FNaF World. One of my favorites in the series. Like, okay, the release was a little rough. I didn't mind the 8-bit overworld, though I can understand why people would be upset by that. The lack of description for character stats and what moves do is definitely a huge issue, especially in a game that doesn't follow normal RPG conventions like this one. But, you know, there was a big update that fixed all those issues, and the version you can get on Steam right now is super good. Oh. Look, the gameplay is fun, the writing is funny, Chipper is back and he's pissed that the Freddy series is bigger than his, there's a bunch of cool and fun references to old school video games, you can play as Cawthon from the Desolate Hope! This is literally the perfect game! There was also an iPhone release, but that changed the dialogue to be about how dumb and stupid FNaF World is. And I really enjoyed FNaF World's original story. There's a lot of fantasy and fun to be had in this world. I'd talk more about this story, but there really isn't that much to say about it. It's just a good time. But that's not really all there is to say about this story. The pieces are there. Find them and put them together. Find the clocks. Lay down the breadcrumbs. This child needs his happiest day to be restored to him. FNaF 4 may have ended on a darker note. This reminds us that FNaF 3 still exists. Reminds us of how they're connected. We are going to help this poor kid. We will save these tortured souls. We will put them back together. And then finally, they can rest. And with that, the series is complete. Ah, shit!